Hello. When you grow potatoes, there comes a point where you want to hill them or to earth them up. I'm Zorab and this is Byther Farm. I'm going to use hilling and earthing up interchangeably in this video, and it's the process by which you basically are adding more organic matter around your potatoes. There are four main reasons for hilling or earthing your potatoes. It gives the plants added stability, so if you're on a very windy site, it stops them rocking so much, and then there's less potential of them snapping. Earlier on in the season, it will help protect against frost. It reduces evaporation, so it allows those plants to access more of the water in the ground. It excludes light from the developing tubers because light on those potatoes will just make them go green. And while green potatoes are fine for replanting, they're no good for eating. And later on, like now, it'll help reduce competition from weeds. And those weeds will be using the nutrients in the soil around the plants. If you grow your potatoes in a trenching style, so you dig a trench, put the potatoes in the bottom, cover them over and create a little mound over them. Once the potatoes have grown about 6 to 8 inches high, you want to earth them up, and that's a case of getting a rake and raking the soil up around the leaves. Now this isn't called burying. You don't want to completely bury them, but you do want to cover and leave a little bit of the growing tips out of the top to carry on being able to photosynthesize and to grow. If you're a no-dig gardener, well, you don't want to be digging that soil up and moving it around, so you want to be adding organic matter around your plants. And whether you grow in a raised bed or under hay or straw, the process is the same. I think it's better to do this in 2 or 3 stages, adding a bit at a time, and then eventually you're going to end up with about 20 centimetres, that's about 8 inches of organic matter around each potato plant, and that should do them really well for the season. These are my potatoes that I'm growing under hay and under duck bedding, and they're very definitely at a point where I could add some more hay around them. Now I've got 2 rows here, and this central bit is literally just a pathway that I made with some extra hay. And you can use hay or straw. Generally straw is much cheaper than hay, but I do know straw is really hard to get hold of in the UK at the moment. There are advantages and disadvantages to using both. Hay will very definitely have grass seeds in it, so if you're using these on a raised bed, just be aware you may well be putting grass seeds into it. But likewise, straw will have some seeds in it, and for both of them you need to make sure, if you can, that you've got organic hay or straw. So I am just placing the additional hay around the outer edges of the plants to make a slightly thicker layer around them to block out the light from the tubers. The disadvantage of using straw if you live in a very damp climate like the UK is that it can become home to slugs very readily, whereas hay is more dense and less likely to be a welcoming environment. You can use grass clippings, not a problem at all, but just make sure that that grass hasn't been treated with any herbicides or selective weed killers, because you don't want that going into your soil. You don't want it potentially killing off your potato plants. My number one choice of material for hilling up in a raised bed is homemade compost. But we only moved here last year, and I don't have nearly enough homemade compost made yet to be able to hill this bed of potatoes. So I'm using what I do have rather than not doing it at all. Now, if like me, you've been following No Mow May and have beautifully long grass, when it comes to cutting it, it's going to look a lot more like hay than like grass clippings. So what I've been doing is leaving it, allowing it to dry out, so that I can use these drier parts on my potatoes And hopefully just a 2-inch layer now and then again next week and the week after will allow me to build up a level of organic matter around my potatoes in quite a short time. You can also hill up your potatoes with leaf mould or leaf mulch, with wood chips and with homemade compost. Now I've got a box of wood chips here, and I'm going to pile some of those around each plant to help exclude the light. Now there are 2 different types of potatoes, determinates, which will put out their new potatoes, their harvest, at the same level as your seed potato. Is it worth hilling these? Yes, I think so, because it will exclude the light, it will reduce competition from weeds, and it will conserve water. And the other type of potato is indeterminate, and they will grow up, and then the tubers, the bit that you want to harvest, will grow not only where the seed potato was, but off the stem as well. So the more of the stem that is covered, the better harvest you're likely to have. So those ones are very definitely worth hilling up. And how do you know which you've got? Well, you probably need to have a look on the internet or at your seed potato supplier. But generally, potatoes that are first and second earlies are likely to be determinate and just grow the potatoes on one level, and main crop potatoes will be indeterminate, and so they are extra worth hilling up so you get a maximum crop possible. And one of the good things about adding all this organic matter around your potatoes is that at the end of the season you can just put your hand in through the organic matter and find potatoes. You can even harvest just a few at a time, or you can pull the whole plant up if you need a lot of potatoes in one go. But this organic matter can then stay on your soil, feeding the soil life, and eventually feeding your plants. And if you want to know whether this process actually works, in 2020 Huw Richards came over to help me harvest a whole load of potatoes. So these potatoes are grown under grass clippings and use chicken bedding that had been stacked for about 8 months. Yeah. I just put masses of grass clippings down, made a hole, put the seed potato so it was actually sitting on the soil, and then covered the grass clippings over the top of them. So they had about 6 inches of grass clippings, and then they've had about another 6 to 8 inches of chicken bedding on top. And so I needed that one more earthing up. Yeah. I needed that particular batch of potatoes to go into veg boxes for that week. So they were harvested maybe a little sooner than many people would harvest their potatoes, but still it gave me a really good crop and allowed me to fill up those veg boxes. So if you want to see the results of my harvest in 2020, I'll leave a link on the screen, and if you click on that, it'll take you straight through to that video.